Street Fighter III Third Strike was awesome. Not many would deny that. It had a lot of unique game mechanics, like the parry for an example. With a risky well-timed forward press, you can parry your opponent's attacks, which can lead to insane punishes. Supers were also really cool as well, cause in many cases it wasn't just a flashy attack that did a lot of damage. Many supers could be used as tools to help your character out. This puts a lot more depth into the game, because every character has 3 supers to choose from, so you can play the way you want to. But we're not talking about flashy supers and cool parry moments, we're talking about another unique mechanic in Third Strike. The taunts. For those that may be new to the game, the taunts in Third Strike actually serve a purpose other than making your friends want to smash a hole in the wall. They actually buff your characters in many different ways. Some characters get really good ones, that becomes a core part of their gameplay, and some, well, don't really get as lucky. I feel like the taunt buff mechanic is something most everyone is aware of, but not many people talk about it. That's what this video is for. We're going to take a quick little deep dive into every taunt buff in this game and how they affect the character, and if they're useful or not. Before we continue, however, if you want to read all about the taunt buffs by yourself, there will be a link in the description to the Street Fighter wiki that explains all you need to know and was a great help for this video to get all my facts straight. But without any further ado, let's get into it. Starting off with Ryu. Honestly, we're not really starting off strong here. Ryu's taunt increases the rate of which his stun meter goes down. This buff, from my knowledge, stays the entire round, and can stack up to 3 times. I did some labbing to find out how helpful this can actually be, so I went into training and did a basic HP Tatsu combo on our dummy. I immediately started a timer to see how long it took for his stun meter to reach 0. It took roughly 15 seconds. The exact number was 14 seconds and 81 milliseconds. Keep in mind that I am the one starting and stopping the timer, so the exact number is likely just a bit different. I then made our dummy do 3 taunts. I did the same combo and it took roughly 11 seconds for it to fully recover. So all in all, a 4-second difference. I did the combo again after, which also took about 11 seconds on the dime. I came to the conclusion that the effects last until the rounds end. And honestly, in my opinion, it's not very useful. It's hard enough to pull off 3 taunts and get away with it, and would likely mean giving up a potential rewarding Oki. Ryu's stun meter is already really big, and the difference the taunts make isn't that much to justify making it an essential part of his gameplay. Moving on to Ken Masters. His taunt will increase the damage of all of his attacks minus throws. Ken already does high damage, so having a tool like this can be very scary. On top of that, the effect doesn't just work for your first hit. Every hit your combo will be affected by it. Here's an example. Normally a basic Ken target combo into double Shoryuken will look like this. The first hit will deal 14 damage. The follow-up will be 8. The first Shoryuken will deal 18 damage, and the second will do 17. Now watch what happens after the taunt. The first hit becomes 19, follow-up becoming 10, the first Shoryuken doing 22 damage, and the second doing 19. Here's the full difference. Turning 57 into 70 is quite the leap. The only small downside that I alluded to earlier is that this taunt is a one-time use. If you use an attack or if your opponent blocks, the effects are removed until you taunt again. Before we move on, I found a very interesting thing I never knew about before. But if your opponent parries one of your attacks, it doesn't remove the buff. It does, however, slightly decrease your buff over time. So if your opponent successfully parries 5 attacks, your buff will be completely removed. I don't know if that's a glitch or intentional or what. Just thought it was worth mentioning. It also can do 2 hits. Nice. Next up is Akuma. Seems I'm keeping up with the Shoto trend, eh? Akuma's taunt is a lot like Ken's, but a bit different. Akuma's taunt increases the power to all of his attacks except the Rose and the Raging Demon. But what makes Akuma's taunt different than Ken's is that it also increases stun damage, which is a nice bonus. Despite the damage increase not working with throws, the stun increase actually works with throws. Here's a couple examples of Akuma's taunt buffs. Next up is our last Shoto, Sean. Sean's taunt increases his stun damage and can be stacked up to 3 times. The effects sadly don't last the entire round and are removed after your attack. Another downside is that the effect won't happen at all if the ball doesn't enter the screen. So you can't just spam taunt for the full buff, you would have to wait until you can spawn the ball 3 times. Luckily, the hit that the ball does will not enter buff. Additionally, Sean's basketball can be used for sneaky mix-ups, which is the only thing really worth noting about his taunt. Alright, everyone's favorite ECW superstar, Alex. His taunt will increase his power for all attacks, including throws. You can achieve this buff 2 ways. Way number 1 is you simply taunt 4 times. Alternatively, you can hold down the taunt button until you hear 8 whiffing sounds. That's just what I call them. To achieve the same effect, you can also hold down the taunt for, let's say, 5 whiffing sounds, then later hold it down for 3. This will also max out your attack. This buff does not stay the entire round and will end after you hit your attack, get blocked, etc. Now to everyone's second favorite ECW superstar, Hugo. Now Hugo's taunt is really cool, and kinda busted. To start things off, his taunt increases his defense and can stack up to 4 times. The effects last the entire round, from my knowledge. His taunt will also increase his attack power, similar to Ken's for 1 attack/combo. This, as almost always, doesn't affect throws. But with Hugo, if you hold down the taunt, it will increase his attack power, and his throws too. One of my favorite taunts, honestly. Now for Ibuki. There's not really that much to talk about her taunt. Her taunt will increase the power of her attacks, including her throws, but only if the taunt hits. Now, Chun-Li's taunt is pretty interesting. The taunt alone is similar to Ryu's, where it increases the rate at which her stun bar depletes and can stack up to 4 times, but she can get other buffs as well. If during her taunt she cracks her neck, her attack power will increase for 1 hit/combo. If she rubs her shoulder, her defense will increase for the entire round. Note, unlike Hugo, her defense buffs don't stack. If she stretches her back, her attack will be increased for the next attack/combo, and her defense will increase once for the whole round. Before we move on, making this video so far and studying all the taunts and their effects really makes me appreciate how much small details and times was put into this game. Man, I love Third Strike. Ahem. Not to get sidetracked. Next is Dudley. On the surface, his taunt is exactly like Ken's. It increases the attack power of your next attack/combo, and does not buff throws. Similar to Ken, Dudley has high attack power, so having more is very scary when you're fighting a good Dudley. Dudley's taunt, similar to Sean, throws a rose at the opponent. This can be used for sneaky mix-ups. And don't worry, the rose hitting the opponent, similar to Sean's, does not affect your buff. Next up is one of my favorite characters, Elena. Her taunt is sadly not very useful in my opinion. It increases her stun damage and can be stacked 4 times, like Sean's. It doesn't last the entire round, and her taunt is very, very slow. It does, however, hit the opponent at close range, which is kinda cool. Next up is another one of my favorites, 12. His taunt is actually really cool and interesting. It has a slow startup, but it turns him invisible. Now, in most cases, you can't get much done using his taunt, since it's easy to just get lamed out by whoever you're fighting. Another problem is that the effect only lasts for about 3.5 seconds. Roughly. The effects will also end if you throw your opponent, get hit, or use a super art. I wish 12's taunt did something like a slight increase in defense and can stack up to 3 times, plus it turns you invisible. Sadly, this isn't a thing, and his taunt actually fits him very well, because to most Third Strike players, 12 is just invisible. Next is Makoto, which her taunt increases her attack and stun recovery. The extent of the effects depend on how long you hold the taunt button down. If you let her perform all 3 actions, your power will increase quite a lot with the addition of stun gauge recovery. I'm pretty sure the stun recovery effects last for the entire round. I did similar experiments to determine how much it helps, like I did with Ryu earlier, and it honestly only seemed to increase the stun gauge recovery speed for maybe a second. You also cannot sadly do the taunt in parts, unlike Alex, who could do some of the taunt, then finish the rest later. Sadly, Makoto just can't do that, at least not for her attack buff. Also, the first action of her taunt also can hit the opponent, which is kinda cool. Quick little side note, if you let Makoto do 2 of her actions, her attack buff will be almost just as good as it was if you let her do all 3. Next is Necro. Now his taunt isn't really anything too special, it increases his attack power for 1 combo/attack, and that's just about it. It can, however, hit the opponent, which is hilarious. Even more hilarious is that if you hold down the taunt, he just keeps wobbling his tongue around. Also, don't worry, if the tongue hits the opponent, it will not get rid of your buffs. Next up is my favorite character to play in this game, good old Oro. Sadly, there isn't much to talk about here. His taunt will make his stun gauge decrease really fast, but unfortunately his waking up animation is kinda slow, and with him having a huge stun bar anyways, I personally never find much use in it. He's just a sleepy old dude after all. Next is Q. I really like Q's taunt because it's fast and really strong. After each taunt he gets a defense boost. It can stack up to 3 times and lasts the entire round. Even if you get hit during the taunt, it's fine. As long as the screen shake effect happens, you got the buff. I also like how it seems like Q has a lot of combo enders and stuff that can get him in a really good position to use a taunt. Next is Remy. His taunt increases his stun damage for his next attack/combo. It can stack up to 4 times, and pretty much just like Elena's, it's not really useful. I hate to sound like I'm glossing over some of these, but I don't want to reiterate too much on stuff I mentioned earlier. Next up is the one and only Speedo-wearing, shield-wielding psychopath. I forgot that I put that in the script. Urien. His taunt increases the power of all his attacks for 1 attack/combo. Like in most cases, his throws do not get this buff. It also doesn't stack. The taunt can also hit your opponent, but in this case, if the taunt hits it, it will not give you your buff, and it only does 1 damage. Ouch. Next is one of the 2 twins, Yang. His taunt is very similar to Urien's, where it increases his attack power for 1 attack/combo. It can also hit the opponent. 2 things are different, however. If his taunt hits, it will not get rid of your buff. Second, your throw's damage is also increased by 1 damage. These buffs also do not stack. And finally, we have Yoon, the second of the 2 twins. His taunt will increase the power of his attacks, even his throws are buffed. His taunt is a lot like Alex's, where about after 8 whooshing sounds, you will reach your full power. Alternatively, you can do 8 taunts with Yoon to max it out. In the wiki it says that his taunt increases the power of special moves with only slight buffs to normal attacks. Personally, I think the normal attacks seem to get a good buff too. Also similar to Alex, you can do, let's say, 4 whooshing sounds, then later do another 4. This should max out your attack power. And of course, after your next attack/combo ends, the effects go with it. And that's all of them. Thanks for watching this video. I tried my best to try everything in training mode and to fact check everything from multiple sources to make sure I didn't get anything wrong. If I did, however, make sure to leave a comment and I'll make sure to pin it. As always, if you have any questions or need any help, also leave a comment. With that, have a great day.